Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 80 of the North Meets South web podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 108. Is that
No,
what you said?
there's no one.
Oh, I was like, I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss this. What is he saying? I missed it. Oh, dang it all. What was it, episode
Definitely
80?
not 108, not at all.
Episode
Just
80.
80.
Episode 80. I forgot I was putting it at the top of my list here. Episode 80. So I don't forget. So when I have to do the thing at the end where we do the thanks for listening, show notes, all that stuff. So I don't forget. I have to put myself a little note there.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 80. Well, I am thoroughly not knackered. Not that, just exhausted. Are those the same? They're not the same.
So you are knackered.
Am I? Okay, I
Yeah.
thought knackered was like inebriated, but not
No.
that. No.
No. Stonkered would be inebriated.
Stonkered. Okay. Sloshed.
Sloshed.
No, I'm not.
Pished. Pished if you're Scottish. Pished.
Oh my. Yeah, I'm just knackered. Just straight up knackered. Dude, it's been a day. It's been a good day, but it's been a day.
What have you got
Built a
yourself into?
bed. I built a bed for Harrison today,
Ah.
my youngest. So, yes.
In the big boy? Upgrading from
In the big boy bed.
in a
Yes, you got it.
bigger
Yep.
big boy? Because Eli's in a big boy
Mm-hmm.
bed, but it's like a little boy big boy bed. So it's the
Mm-hmm.
bed that he's gone into after the cot, but not obviously his final single bed. He's just in a
Sure.
little. So it's still the same cot size mattress. It's just not in
Yep.
the cot. So that's where he's
Yep.
at the
No.
moment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I remember when my kid he's been in the crib the longest. He calls it his cage. You make me sleep in my cage tonight? Yeah, your cage, buddy.
Nice.
But he finally figured out how to crawl out of it. He's been able to crawl out of that thing for forever. He just never realized it. And then the other night, um, he just came out, Daddy, I'm thirsty. I need a drink. And I'm like, where did you come from? Like, how did you just get out of that stinking crib?
Yeah.
So anyway, now he's so excited. So the cool thing is, like, I built my oldest bed when he kind of got out of the crib stage, and so I get to build a matching one for my
Nice.
youngest. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So, but it was really hot out today, and so I was outside sweating like crazy and just working in the heat. It was, but I'm good. I'm good.
That's good. That's good. Yeah,
Yeah, what's your day held?
we've had a bit of a break in the wet weather at least. So I got a chance to go out and mow down my weed garden yesterday, which was nice.
Oh, nice.
Um, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was. It's quite sensible. When I cut the grass, it looked mostly like grass, and the weeds were kind of around the edges, which is good. Which means the grass is kind of lush in the middle. But I got the line trimmer out, went around the edges and got the blower out and cleaned up after myself, and yeah, I had a pretty good time. My brother took Eli for a walk yesterday, and Ree went and had a nap, so I went and made the most of that.
Yeah, how's Ree
It's
feeling these days?
she's sort of been fighting a cold on and off for the last 3 weeks, so it comes and then it goes and then it comes again. So, but she's 30 weeks today, so
I was gonna say, you
things
just got
are
like what, 2 more months?
yeah,
September, October. It's
pretty
in
much like
October,
that.
right?
Yeah, we've got 12 weeks. So the baby will be here no later than the 30th of September. So we're
Oh,
all
okay.
booked
Oh, okay.
in.
I'm sorry. I was off. I thought it was October. My bad.
Well, the due date is the 4th of October, but
Okay.
because she had a prior cesarean, they won't let her go to 40 weeks.
Got it.
So
Gotcha. That
it'll be
makes
the
sense.
30th of September at the latest. That is, if the baby's not here by then we're scheduled for a cesarean. But hopefully sometime between 38, well, 36 and 38, 37 and 38 preferably, and not 3 weeks early like Eli was.
Yeah,
I'd
for
like to
sure.
avoid having to do that, especially now. 2 years ago it was okay. It was an inconvenience, but it was fine. But I'd rather not be in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Yeah, no
just with
thanks.
everything that's going on at the moment. So, but yeah, things are
For
tracking
sure.
well. Everything, the baby's where it's supposed to be, and upside down, and partying, and the placenta's out of the way this time. So it's looking to be smooth sailing at this stage. So fingers crossed, knock
Second
on
time's the
wood, all
charm.
that stuff. Yeah, that's it.
Yep. That's awesome. Good,
I
man.
said to
Well, that's
Reese,
great.
as soon as the second one's out, I'm going to go into the theater next, and I just have them get the scissors out and just not not leaving anything
And
to
for all
chance.
you Americans, the theater is the surgery unit, I think, right? That's what
Oh,
you're talking about. I think
operating
they
room.
actually do call it operating room. Thank you.
Mm.
I think that's what they actually technically would call it in America too, but I don't think most of us would know that. The theater. Yeah, right. Yep. Get it all taken care of at once. Why not? 2-for-1 deal.
That's right. One
Hey,
in and
Doc,
one
you think
out.
you can take care of this? Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah,
Hey, man, I got a couple things on my
go on.
list. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, hit us. I got nothing. Go.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So I've got a couple things to talk about. So we've switched a lot of stuff over to Cloudflare recently, and I think it was a mystery sort of at first. It was like one of those things for me where like it was like Redis and Laravel. Now Redis and Laravel is great, and we use it all the time now. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like unless you actually spend a little bit of time looking at it, it can be confusing as to like where it's set up or like where all of the settings are. Because there's like it's in database.php, it's in
Yeah,
queue.php,
it's a
it's
bit
in
spread out.
horizon.php,
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, you gotta exactly. You just kind of gotta spend a little bit of time
I never
digging
look
into
at
it.
the right one the first time either.
Exactly. Yeah. So for Cloudflare, like that was a little bit of a mystery that I unraveled a little bit. It's not complicated, really, and you might be already aware, but I thought I could talk about that a little bit. I've been working on Then Ping Me's landing page.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things about Tailwind UI, as well as pricing and features, like how we were breaking that down and kind of like what our thoughts have been on that. And then also this new pattern with it's not new. It's not new. It's pipelines, which we use. But Zangle has a little library that they've kind of sprinkled on top of Laravel pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you a little bit of syntactic sugar to do some of the. What it reminds me of HTTP, the HTTP client that comes with Laravel,
Yeah.
as opposed to like using Guzzle. You can do all the
Mm-hmm.
same things, but there's just a
Mm-hmm.
couple niceties that are added in there. So those are kind of the three things that I had. So Cloudflare, homepage, Zangle. Which one tickles your fancy?
Let's talk about Cloudflare first, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So have you had much experience with Cloudflare?
Only things that I'm using for caching purposes. So putting the Laracon AU website sits behind Cloudflare. My blog sits behind Cloudflare, just for
Yeah.
those blue moon scenarios where I get a ton of traffic at once. It
Yeah.
doesn't
I was
happen
gonna say,
often.
like for you, like what's the primary benefit have been? Like what has been the and is that why typically like you want to have that sort of built-in web application firewall that they give you
Yeah,
so that if there's an attack or something, you can kind of mitigate it?
it's less around the attack and more around just having it always being available, and having it fast around the world, because I host it on a server in Sydney, but for someone in the US, that's the latency introduced by that trip is a couple of hundred milliseconds, and then someone in Europe, it's probably 300 milliseconds, depending on where you are and the provider that you're on. So using something like Cloudflare means that it's always going to be snappy, irrespective
Mm-hmm.
of where you're viewing it from. And when it's a blog and it's just realistically static text, it's not images and videos and things like that. You just want it to load. You don't want to have it, you don't want to have to wait a second or two for a page to load. So it's nice from that
Sure.
perspective. And that's the main thing that I use it for. I don't really look at any of the other tooling that Cloudflare use. I don't even use Cloudflare's DNS, the 1.1.1.1.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like I feel like there are a number of benefits to using Cloudflare. Like I feel like you touched on some of the most important ones, which is that they have locations like edge locations all around the globe, and so the response times are pretty quick overall. In addition, depending on how you have it set up, and I can dig into that a little bit. you can enable like a web application firewall, which will basically intercept. It basically puts Cloudflare in between the requests coming in and your actual web server. So there's a tiny bit of intelligence. I think it adds about like 100 milliseconds, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That might not even be correct, but to the latency. But it provides you some really nice features, such as like DDoS protection. So like if somebody's hammering your site, it kind of puts a little bit of a blocker in there and says what it'll do is it will kind of almost rate limit their requests to your web server, and it'll make them wait like a second or two before they can continue on, which will protect you from the sort of DDoS attacks. And then it also adds a lot of monitoring and things like that too for free, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
So there's that. And then there's also like, it comes with like free SSL for everybody, right? Again, kind of like whether you use them just for DNS or whether you use them for proxy. So maybe I start there. So, the way that we did is we switched over our entire main domain to Cloudflare. So all of our name servers for that domain now point to Cloudflare. And when you do that, you have an option for each one of your records that you're hosting with them. You can either set it as DNS only, which basically changes nothing about the way it's currently routing and just uses, your DNS records are now hosted at Cloudflare rather than wherever your previous provider was. Or they have that proxy option, right? And that proxy option is what gives you all of these kind of cool benefits. One of those benefits, and the confusing part for me was like, where is the SSL stuff happening? And that was the part for me that I didn't understand, right? And I think that was sort of what I was talking about when I said like, here's how this made sense to me. So the way that it works is if you have proxy turned on for one of your DNS records, what they will do is they have their own certificate that they will issue for your root domain as a wildcard root domain, right? So they have SSL for all of your domains for your root domain, for anything that you put on there. So if you ever use their proxy, for all your subdomains, exactly. So if you ever use their proxy option, it will have secured HTTPS for your site. But what it does, right, is it just forwards that traffic to wherever it was previously, right? So you could even have like an HTTP. It could be forwarding to an HTTP on your server. So you don't have a cert on your server.
Yeah, in
right?
a lot of situations it is. Like if you turn, for example, if you just turn the secure offloading on Cloudflare, it will still be HTTP traffic from Cloudflare to your server unless you explicitly configure it otherwise, which is fairly normal. Like all of our stuff that sits behind a HA proxy load balancer, we offload SSL or offload secure certificates on the HA proxy, and then from the HA proxy to the application servers themselves is just HTTP traffic.
Yeah. Now I feel like the only risk you really run with that is if you still allow HTTP traffic over that, it's a possibility that somebody could expose your IP address. And if they can expose your IP address, if they can figure out what the IP address of the server that you're actually trying to, that they're actually sitting in front of, they could technically send HTTP traffic over that. But it's not really a risk because it's not like they can force one of your clients to do HTTP and sit in the middle. So
especially if your application servers are sitting on a Class A network, like if they're not exposed to the internet, you can have that. I'll give you that IP address. You're not going to get to it anyway.
Sure. Yep. That's a good point. So they do, however, offer this option though that you can say, maybe you've already have a server that has HTTPS on it, right? So maybe before you had Cloudflare, you already had a certificate issued. That's no problem either. They'll handle that as well. Yep. So they'll take the initial traffic, they'll HTTPS, and then they will pass the traffic to you over HTTPS, right? And you can force HTTPS over that connection, whatever. So you have secure traffic to Cloudflare, secure traffic from Cloudflare to your server, and all the way back through. Mm-hmm. So that was the part that was confusing for me. So that's full mode. But then they also have this thing called full strict. And what full strict does is it handles the secure connection from your client to Cloudflare. And then from Cloudflare to your server, what they will do is they will issue what's called an origin certificate. So they will create a new certificate, and then you put that on your machine. And the cool thing about those is that they're good for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't matter. You never have to really think about installing a cert on your server ever again. You install that one origin certificate one time and you're done. And they will handle all of the front end. Like they'll handle renewing that root wildcard certificate on Cloudflare. So your HTTPS is always kind of up to date from your client to Cloudflare. And then the connection from Cloudflare to you is 15 years later. You don't have to until you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool because that's always like one of those things I feel like kind of hangs over your head, especially when you have like a lot of domains. Like you end up getting an email on some random day that like, hey, your certificate is expiring. And it's like, holy crap, you better have caught that email. I don't know if that's ever happened to you where like a cert expires out from underneath you. Has that
Not
ever
for
happened? You
not for
don't do that
work.
stuff, you said. I remember
Yeah.
you telling me that. Yeah.
For work, our stuff is managed. So all of our certificates are part of system patching. So we've got a package that has all of our wildcard certificates and things like that in there. So if the systems team updates the certificates, they just yum update all of the servers and that's all done. For my personal stuff, Taylor Otwell actually published back in 2017 an article on how to use the free wildcard SSL on Forge and Cloudflare and how to get that set up in full, like full SSL end-to-end encryption. So we can link that up as well.
Yeah, that's like the full strict he was talking about as well. And that's actually that was the blog post that I saw, but I still, even in looking at that, I didn't completely understand the flow. But that once I kind of dug in a little bit, it made a little bit more sense to me. So I've been switching over to that as much as possible, like using Cloudflare. And like, so if you're fortunate enough to have a team that can do that for you, that's excellent. The situation in which I've had this happen to me is like at the nonprofit I help at. Right, they don't have anybody technically minded there, and so if that email comes through and I didn't see it or whatever,
yeah.
Thankfully, I actually just convinced them to start using Oh Dear as well.
Yeah.
So that's been good. So like that'll monitor those certificates.
That's good. Like Oh Dear gives you that extra thing because it's not just your certificate expiring, but we've seen probably twice in the last 3 months where some intermediary certificates have expired, and when an intermediary expires and you're not on the pulse with that, lots of weird things can start happening because it'll be things that you've been connecting to, for example, that have worked for a long time. And if you don't update the intermediaries or the people you're connecting to don't update the intermediaries, then those things can stop working as well. So having something like Oh Dear and using that to monitor your sites and things to make sure that everything is working and all of the certificates in the chain are valid, because they can, be revoked at any time. And typically no one does anything about it. You get the email, you don't get the email, maybe you don't notice it. And then the next thing you know, one day all of your stuff just stops working. And we saw that, a few weeks ago where that certificate, and then half the internet went blammo. And speaking of the half the internet going blammo, the only downside to using Cloudflare is when something goes wrong, you see just how much of the internet relies on Cloudflare because it all just goes kaput all at once.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The good thing is you have an excuse if that happens. It's like, hey, listen, you can't even freaking get to anything else either. That's so right. Like,
yeah, I was because I use Oh Dear for some stuff, and I use Ping, which is a project from Stefan Bauer, and when they had the issue with Cloudflare recently, I was talking to him a little bit around like how that monitoring works, because it was not all of Cloudflare that had issues, but the way, I don't envy them the task of like monitoring stuff, and it's very difficult to monitor if someone's application or someone's website is up, if the thing that you are relying on to determine that is not working. And so a lot of Europe was compromised by that issue, which meant that when they were doing the checks from two places in Europe, well, both of them couldn't actually reach your site in the US, for example. So then, they sent an alert saying, yeah, this is down. So they worked really hard and really quickly over that weekend where that happened to roll out some additional checks and check from different locations around the world. Because, it's hard to, and then you have to figure out, like, if I've got two negatives from Europe, but the US is okay, and a ping from Australia is okay, is the site okay? Can you say that that's maybe a localized impact as opposed to total outage of the site? So I think doing uptime monitoring is even trickier than doing scheduled task monitoring by the sounds of things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I bet that's true. Yeah. Hey, one other reason I wanted to bring this up is because I don't know if you've seen this, this idea of like 1 year certificates in the browser makers. So um, basically, what it sounds like is it sounds like Chrome. I don't want to misquote anything here. Google's latest announcement, although it sounds major, is just one more step
Apple,
towards the
Google, and
inevitability
Mozilla.
of 1 year validation for SSL and TLS certs. Yeah, and since Apple cleared the way for them to do it with their approach, Google has clear passage to do what they've longed to do for several years. The only change is that they've now put their official stamp on it. Starting September 1st, 2020, public SSL TLS certs will only be issued with a 1 year validity period from all major certificate authorities. So what that means is that, so because some people might be saying, okay, well, so what about Cloudflare? Like, what's the big deal, right? I mean, I can still issue a 5 year cert
Yeah,
from my
sure.
certificate authority, but what I'm
But then
saying is
when
very quickly
Safari
that's
and
not going to be the
Chrome, yeah,
case.
when Safari and Chrome and Firefox all show that a certificate that is longer than 398 days in expiration is invalid, you're gonna have
Yeah,
lots of
that
issues. And
hurts.
this I guess, without reading the article, I'll link it up in the show notes, but without reading the article before I make a wild claim, I would assume it's to avoid these issues where, like, those intermediaries that get signed for 5 years or 10
Sure.
years or whatever, and then there's an issue discovered in the OpenSSL or in the encryption protocols or whatever that
Yeah.
necessitates them having to revoke the certificate. Well, it means that those things usually don't happen until 2 or 3 years after the certificate is signed. So to have a certificate that's renewed every 12 months as opposed to every 5 years minimizes the surface area of that impact.
Yeah.
And like I said before, we've seen this now sort of 2 or 3 times in the last few months where it's had significant impact to heaps of people across the place. So I think
It doesn't
I
seem like
guess
an
it's the
unreasonable requirement.
yeah, I think it's the right thing, but the certificate authorities and the companies that are responsible for that, they'll slug you $1,000 up front to get a certificate for 10 years or whatever, and it's great for them. But it's I think security, especially now with so much stuff is transacted across the internet, it's definitely important, I think, to keep that security as tight as possible.
Yeah, and so like you have options, right? So it's like, okay, now that you're going to have to do this, you can either renew your certs manually every year. That's an option. Or you can use something like Let's Encrypt, and those issue for like 3 months at a time, whatever, and those just continue. Or you can use something like Cloudflare, where they manage that front end cert for
Yeah.
you. They will just automatically renew that, and then you can still put that 15-year origin cert because it doesn't matter. The browser's never seeing that. That's encrypted tunnel traffic between Cloudflare and your server.
Yes. Maybe.
So anyway, yeah.
Well,
I'm pretty sure that's how
yeah,
that works.
it's part of, well,
It's practically a self-signed cert. Like it's not
yeah,
even
yeah, because because Cloudflare is signing the certificate to the server and it's
correct.
saying, yeah, okay, this is fine. So yeah,
Yes.
I suppose that's right. Theoretically, the browser will never see the certificate between Cloudflare and your server, so it's probably fine.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's another option, right? You can do it that way. And that's kind of like in addition to the other things. I think the initial problem that kind of pushed me towards using the Cloudflare solution was that I've had Let's Encrypt break a couple times, and in one case in particular, I spent practically a day on trying to figure out why this dumb thing wouldn't work after like a server upgrade.
Yeah.
Like there was like Python was having an issue. I'm like, forget this. Like it's not worth it. Like there's other alternatives to this solution, of
Exactly.
using Let's Encrypt. And so anyway, yeah. So that's kind of all the stuff I had on Cloudflare. And it sort of feels like a Stripe. Like when you start getting into Stripe, like you realize, oh my gosh, there's all these other amazing products that I didn't even know existed that I now have access to because I have a Stripe account that's hooked up with a bank account, right? And Cloudflare is the same. It's like you get into it and it's like, oh wow, like I not only get the web application firewall, and it also will cache static assets for me, so it acts as like a CDN, right, and pushes that stuff out to the edge. You get all sorts of crazy cool stuff. So Cloudflare is pretty awesome. We've been using it a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing solution. in your situation, especially for the nonprofit, and if you're a single developer somewhere, to be able to offload that stuff and
Yeah,
not have to worry about it.
absolutely. Yep. Hey, we could probably jump into then ping me next.
Yeah.
So I've been working on the homepage. Do we want to talk about that and pricing and like features, or did you have anything else you want to talk about before that?
No, let's dig in, because you've been
Cool.
working hard on that and getting it up
Yeah.
to scratch, which is exciting to see. And we could probably talk a little bit about our release plans now as well, and our strategy for actually bringing this thing to life, to existence, to putting it in the hands of people.
Yeah, for sure. So we've had a sucky, crappy homepage up for a long time, pre-Tailwind UI, if you will. Um, and so using Tailwind UI has been great. The thing I like about Tailwind UI though as well is it's so much better than Bootstrap because Bootstrap was so difficult to customize, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing about Tailwind UI is I can kind of take a pattern and use it almost as inspiration, copy and paste that code, and then quickly modify anything that I need to get a custom look and feel rather than just dropping it in out of the box, right? A perfect example is like in one of their situations, they have a light header with a dark stripe kind of beneath that. And we switched that, right? So we made it so like the header was actually had a dark gradient behind it and then transitions to like a white page underneath it. And that stuff is so simple to do with Tailwind UI. But
Mm-hmm.
before, like pretty much any other template that you would download or pay for, it's nearly impossible to do that sort of stuff. It just makes it so difficult. And with Tailwind UI, it's just so beautiful and so easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been working on that. You've made some suggestions. I'm totally like a light and white, bright looking. That's like my aesthetic, and you've kind of pushed me a little bit, like, hey, no, it would be cool if we'd actually did like a little bit more of like a darker, not a
Mm.
darker theme. That's not even really the word we're looking for,
Yeah.
but it's just like higher contrast. I think maybe is the better word for it.
Yeah.
Instead of like everything being stark white, it's like no, add some like dark colors in there and like give it some good contrast and good pop. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been working on that a little bit. So that's been cool. So we're just kind of like refining the message. I'm going to be adding some interactive elements to the front page, which I'm really excited about. Alpine makes this stuff pretty freaking easy,
Mm-hmm.
which has been really fun. So yeah, we're rocking the tall stack on this, and that's been really enjoyable. It's so nice and easy to get stuff started and set up with that. So that's been good. And then the last section that we've been working on and arguing about has been the features in the pricing section. So basically, what are the core features? What things need to be different between the different tiers? And then what are our actual price points going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some good discussions around that. So we're still working on kind of where we want the actual price points to fall. But do we want to talk at all about the actual price points, or do you just want to talk about the features?
No, I think we'll leave the pricing itself out, but I do want to talk about how we're sort of thinking about modeling the pricing, and how I think it makes sense for this type of solution, especially the way that we're selling it as a Laravel specific thing. So some of the competitors in the market will sell this based on the number of of monitors you have, right? So for example, one of our competitors says for the base plan you get 50 monitors per month, or whatever. You get 50 monitors included as part of your package. So that basically means that you could have 5 applications or 6 applications all sharing that same um that pool of
Plan.
tasks.
Yeah.
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 And so you could spread that out. The way that we're doing it, because it is Laravel specific, we're going to do it per project or per application, which I think makes the most sense. And then when you set up a project, you can have as many scheduled tasks as you want within that project. And whether that's one task or 20 tasks or 100 tasks, it doesn't matter to us, right? It's all within the context of that project. And then we will say, the number of log days you get. So we'll show you the last 7 days or the last 14 days or the last 30 days, whatever the number is. It's just records in a database. So it's not really that important to me in terms of what that is. Where it really comes into it is that you get a project or a number of projects, and then for a business, like if you're an agency, for example, we'll just say, you know, unlimited projects, unlimited tasks, and go from there. So I think that's kind of the way to do it. I don't think there's any real reason to limit a project to say that you can have one project and 10 tasks, because that's not how we build applications, right? We want to monitor our application. We don't want to monitor parts of our application, and you don't want to have to
Yeah,
sit there
totally.
and decide, oh, well, these 10 tasks are important, but these ones are not. I think if it's a scheduled task, it has a very specific purpose to your business and a very specific reason to be. So to say that, you know, you have to decide which is an important task and which is not, I don't agree with, and it's not how I want my, like, anything that runs in any of my tasks. Horizon Snapshot. It's not important to me that the snapshot data exists so much as that the task that is there, like, we want that data and we want to know that it's reliably running. So, you know, I don't want to have to decide that we don't want to monitor that. Just tell me if it doesn't work, right? Because if it doesn't work, chances are that some other task isn't working either. And so it's important to know that. So
Also, depending on the way that, or just kind of based on the way that we're setting these things up, which is that, like, the best way, I hate to use the word AI. It's not, right? That's not the word, but it's basically, it's automatic. Everything is automatic about it. So it's like it intelligently looks at all of the jobs that you have and automatically updates them on each deploy. So how would you even suss that out to say, like it would be so silly if, like, oh yeah, your project worked when you started, but that was when you only had 10 monitors. Now that you added a new one, what are you going to do? Throw an error in the console? Be like, we can't update your job list because you're over the limit? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think project based is.
Yeah, we want you to monitor your project. It's important that and as your project grows, naturally the number of tasks are going to grow, and it doesn't change the number of projects you have. We do certainly have the ability to, because this was something that we considered very early on, was what if someone just gets like one project key and then uses that for multiple projects? Won't work. You can try it, and you'll find out the hard way why that's not going to work. So it's definitely there. So, you know, one project, one and as many tasks as you have, like, whatever. That's whether you have 1 or 10. You know, if you've only got one project, chances are you don't have 1,000 tasks in it, most likely.
Yeah.
And so we do it that way. No teams for that. But then if you go into another level where you've got multiple projects, chances are you're a little bit bigger and you need to share that stuff. So we'll let you have team access, and you get a number of team members. So it'll be, you know, 10 members or 20 members, whatever it is, whatever we decide. And you have more than one project, right? So you have a number of projects, you have the ability to have team members, and you can just invite people into that team and they can, you know, check there and they can set up notifications and all that kind of stuff. And then there'll be a third tier, which would just be the unlimited team members, unlimited projects, and unlimited monitors, and off you go. So all of the features will be available to all of the tiers. I don't think it makes sense to restrict the features. You want to know anything that fails in any of your projects, whether you've got one project. It could be one project that's generating you $10 million a year, right? So it's important that you have all of the features, whether your project is generating $10 million a year or $1,000 a year. Right, because that $1,000 is significant to you. If that's what it's generating, then you want to make sure that you're making that $1,000 a year. So all of the features for all of the tiers, it's just how many projects you have access to and how many team members, or if you have team members.
Yeah, so it keeps our feature list really simple, right? Or I guess the other way to say it is, like, you know, the feature differences or the tier differences are actually quite minimal. Like, it really is, like, there's only kind of two columns that are going to be different, which is the number of projects you have and the number of team members that have access to your projects. Yeah, so that's been kind of cool. one other item that I wanted to talk about with Tailwind, and specifically on this homepage, is specifically in their pricing section, they use grids, like CSS grids. So we talked a little bit about this, you and I did. What's your experience been with CSS grids? Have you been able to use them at all?
The only place I've used grid is when I copied and pasted some Tailwind UI stuff for a form, and that
Okay.
happened to have some grids in there. But uh, I've, I have one time used CSS grid and Tailwind specifically to build a calendar. So I needed
Oh,
to
really?
display
Nice.
a calendar, and so that was the perfect thing because I need 7 columns and however many rows I need, and there needs to be a nice gap around each of those things, and it took me couple of minutes to like read the docs, figure out exactly what I needed, how to put the spacing in there, and that was it. Like it was done. And so now I've got this good looking calendar that has the information I need in it ready to go for me. So
Yeah,
that's it.
grid is
That's the
so
extent
nice.
of
Yeah.
my gridding.
Yeah, so the cool thing is like if you just need to lay out a simple grid like that, and each one of your cells in that grid, for example, needs to take up or needs to be a specific space and whatnot, the grid works amazingly for that, and that's fine. It also works great for like if you're laying out like a actual, we've had, I don't know if Bootstrap was the first one to introduce grids, right? This idea of like columns and gaps and all those sorts of things, which is it's just great.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I really appreciate about Grid that I think Tailwind utilizes it well for, um, maybe I think, uh, mm, now that I say that, I'm not exactly sure if they actually do in their pricing section or not. But what it is it's overlaps. So in the past, you've had to use absolute positioning. If you ever wanted to do something where you wanted to have one position sort of, or one element sort of over top of another element, but sort of like just to the side. So I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Um, hmm.
We've used like negative margins to offset
Yeah, sure. That's a good way to say it. That's a
different
good way to think
elements.
about it.
So I think a fairly common one that you see a lot is like a screenshot of a product that
Okay.
overlaps. So you would because you want it to overlap upwards. So it's like hanging over the top section and the bottom section. So you would actually render that outside of the top section and then use a
Correct.
negative
Yes.
margin to like hoist it up so that it sits
Yeah,
over the
yeah.
two things, which breaks
Yep.
the flow of the document and things like that a little bit.
Yeah, so with grid, one of the nice things that you can do is you can actually specify the grid. So you can specify the width of every column, you can specify the width or the height of every row, and then you can arbitrarily place elements on this grid. So if you think about it like a bulletin board, almost if you will. And if you were to put lines on a bulletin board of yours, well, on a bulletin board, there's nothing saying that only one item can occupy a space on that bulletin board. You can kind of layer things on a bulletin
Mm-hmm.
board, right? So you could pin a picture underneath, and you can pin a picture on top of that, and another picture, below that in the other corner. So you've established this grid, but you can put anything arbitrarily on top of anything else, no problem with CSS grid. So it's pretty cool. So once you define this grid, you can say, okay, this element goes from column 1 to column 4. And then the next item, you can say it goes from column 2 to column 8. And those things overlap, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are underneath each other or over top of each other, and grid handles that with no problem. Like there's no hacks. With absolute positioning, one of the things is always like, does it get cut off on the edge of the screen, or do you get these weird bugs when you're in mobile or stuff like that? And grid is like a native solution to handle these sorts of unique situations where you have like overlaps and like z indexes that need to be accounted for, but it doesn't feel like you're hacking around on stuff
Yeah.
or just like, oh, it works for this screen size, because you're not dealing with like percentage widths and stuff, percentage offsets that kind of change as the screen sizes
Yeah.
change. It just feels so much better. I feel like it's this like golden key being handed down from the CSS gods. Like, here you are. This is the way
Mm-hmm.
that you do this now. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it for so long using absolute positioning and negative margins and
Yeah.
percentages. It's just like a little gift. That's
It
been kind of
is.
cool.
It definitely is. So
Yeah.
it's nice. We've got a few little bits and pieces that we just need to tidy up with the landing page, but we're gonna have it out. What does it say? It'll be out a couple of days after we release this episode. So on the 1st of August. Well, actually, we hope to have this page out before the 1st of August, but on the 1st of August, we're going to start inviting some people that are already on the early access list to start using it, just so that we can get some feedback. I fixed up what I think hopefully to be the last of the small niggly bugs today when I was working on my talk for the Laravel meetup next month. So the 1st of August, if you're on the list, we're going to start sending out some invitations, getting people into the early access. We'll reach out to you and speak to you about, what you're using it for and the alerting. We're shipping with just email alerts for now, just to get things up and running, and we'll probably run that way for a little while longer, probably into September, just so that we can take the feedback from the early access users and things like that and start getting some information in there. While it's in early access, we won't charge, because you're going to be helping us out, making sure that we've got this product really polished. And then I'm presenting at the Laravel meetup on the 25th of August, and that is when we're going to launch.
1 month from the time we're recording this.
Yeah, basically 1 month from today. Assuming that all goes well with the early access and something isn't horrifically broken, that means we have to rewrite huge chunks of the application. we will open it up, and we will start doing that. So we'll probably have we'll definitely have a launch offer, which will be lovely. That'll give you some discount off the monthly fee for some portion of time, once you're in. So if you're not really sold on monitoring your scheduled tasks, definitely check out the presentation at the Laravel meetup next month. I go into a lot of detail about what specifically can and does go wrong with scheduled tasks, things that you and I, Jake, have seen in our own applications, things that sort of led to why we even spent the last, October till now. Well, it's basically been 12 months that on and off that we've been working on this.
I just had to renew our domain.
Yeah. So it's been 12 months. And talking about cron specifically, like what is cron and why Laravel's task scheduler is nicer in a lot of ways, and some of the things that we've bumped on, things that you wouldn't, maybe more experienced developers are aware of these things, but there's still things that can slip through the gaps. And if you're not monitoring, you don't notice these kinds of things. You won't ever see them. And there were things in my main application at work that we just didn't have any visibility over. So we didn't know they weren't working, or they weren't working as we expected, because there's various degrees of not working when it comes to scheduled tasks. So I talk
100%.
I talk about all of these things in this presentation. So I hope that you learn. It's not going to be a talk about then ping me. It's going to be a talk about things that you need to think about when you're working with scheduled tasks in applications. So I will touch on then ping me right at the end. That's where that we will announce officially the launch, and there will be a Laravel meetup discount to go along with it as well. So we cover a lot of stuff. Well, I say I cover a lot of stuff in this talk. I move very quickly through lots of slides. I've finished the slide deck now.
Nice. That's awesome.
Which takes me to, let me...
that came along pretty quick, honestly. Overall, I feel like, for as many slides as you have,
I have 192 slides. That is the final deck. That is the completed deck as of right now. I may shuffle some things around and add and remove and change things. I'm really looking forward to giving the presentation as I was like building it out and coming across all these different things and finding what we're doing, and how these things can sort of be a little bit painful. It really, I think it's going to be an informative talk, and one of the sort of more planned out and considered talks that I've ever given. Most of the time when I speak at my local meetup, it's like 2 days before the meetup that I realize that I'm the one that is actually going to have to present, and so I will make something up in 2 days. So this one has been a little bit more planned out and a little bit more considered.
Yeah, for sure. We were able to work through.
Yeah, the one key thing that I want to say is that monitoring is not error tracking when it comes to scheduled tasks.
Yeah, that was something I feel like we got hung up on pretty early on. We kind of had to make that distinction. Be like, no, this is not error tracking. We're not rebuilding Sentry and Bugsnag, right? That's not what we're doing. Yeah. Good point. Hey man, I feel like maybe we could talk about the Zango pipelines thing real quick, just the library, and then maybe hang this one up.
Yep.
What do you think?
I think that sounds good.
Cool. Okay, so let me see if I can pull this stuff up real quick. There it is. Handling complex data flows. So there's a post out there by Jesse Shutt, and he kind of talks through how they use pipelines, just Laravel's default pipelines, to take something that was previously in a controller that maybe you have handled through private methods, but there's multiple things that need to be happening when a user signs up for their for a new account or something like that, right? So instead of trying to squash it all into private methods or even into separate jobs and things like that, they kind of break it up into three things. So they have the request and the response, which happens in the controller. So that's part one. Part two is the data itself. So what's like all the pieces of information that are coming in, username, passwords, errors, whatever. It's like a DTO, if you will. And then they have the logic that acts upon the data. So really the way that they break this up is they leave everything in the controller that needs to stay in the controller. They put the request into a DTO, and then they have everything else run through pipes, which is essentially exactly, Michael, what you described last time I think we were on this show, which was how you broke up the entire process of how we figure out if something needs to be alerted or how we need to update the task versus the execution versus the project based on what type of ping we're getting in and those sorts of things. So pushing all of that data or all that logic flow into pipes. And so basically through this process, they talk through some of the things that they discovered, and they've created a nice little package out of this, some of their conclusions. So basically some of the things that it adds is, you know how I was saying before, it reminds me of the HTTP client that you get in Laravel now. In a pipe right now, I believe in a pipeline in Laravel, if you get an exception, it just kind of blows everything up, right? And then you can catch that on the outside if you care to. So you could wrap your entire pipeline in a try-catch, and then handle those exceptions on the outside. So you can catch the exception and then do whatever you need to do, just like you would with any other piece of PHP code. One of the other things you might consider doing as well is something like a database transaction. So it's very possible, actually probably typical, that if you're passing a piece of data that is going to be persisted to your database through these pipelines, you don't really want to write that data unless it all works. You know what I'm saying?
Correct, yeah.
So this idea of using a database transaction to handle a partially completed pipeline, so you get halfway through and something blows up, instead of having this weird record in your database that's not fully formed, instead you would just have a DB transaction or start transaction, and then if it fails and you catch it, then you'd do DB rollback. Otherwise, you'd DB commit. Yeah. And so this pipeline package that they have handles those sort of database interactions and transactions for you. So instead of calling app pipeline and then through pipes, then whatever, you just say with their thing, you say new pipeline class. And I think, let me just look at it real quick, actually. I have to remember here. It basically takes three arguments. It takes your traveler, your pipes, and then a true or false based on whether you want it to be using database transactions or not. Then if it blows up, it swallows that exception for you. And then at the end, you just have this, you set the result of the pipeline equal to a variable, which would be called like response. And then you can check at the end, did it pass? Did it fail? Did it have an exception? What was the message of the exception, right? You can get the exception itself. So it kind of just wraps a lot of these things that are common things you would want to do when using the pipeline flow, and gives it to you in a nice little package format. And then also gives you some tips on how you can test as well. I know one of the things that I've had a problem with Michael, I'm not sure if you had an issue with this or not. Um, in a pipeline situation that I have in a project that I work on, I'm actually passing the model itself through these pipes. But what
Mhm.
I found is that in a lot of the situations that I have, like halfway through those pipes, I actually need like an additional piece of information that's not on the model itself. And so the question then becomes, well, do I pass an additional parameter to the rest of my pipes? Like, or how does that work, right? Like, how do I switch out which parameter I'm passing through this sort of middleware stack almost?
Mm.
And so the solution that they have is basically you register this DTO that then will accept your model item, and then you can kind of pin on any other additional things that you want to pass through the rest of the pipes.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about like what is it you're passing through. You just have this fully formed DTO that knows in this list of pipes, I'm going to need these three things at some point, and then you can set or get those out of that DTO at any point in your pipeline. Um, so I guess what I'm saying is the between the blog post and the open source package, I feel like a lot of the things that I've run into when using pipelines previously have been made a little bit easier and have basically brought to light some solutions that otherwise you wouldn't determine or you wouldn't find for yourself unless you've kind of used them in a real world application.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought I'd give a quick shout out to that.
Yeah, I
Pretty
found
cool.
it in then ping me with the pipelines. Most of the stuff that I was using was tacked off the traveler, so it was a single traveler model, so it was easy enough to just load it, and then because you pass that variable onto the next
Yes.
class in the pipeline, you don't have to, because it's all happening in a single. It's not like it's going onto a queue and then off a queue and on, so it doesn't
Right. Exactly.
lose what's on that model. You're passing the same instance through. So if you load another relationship and then return that to the next handler, well, it knows, all that stuff's already loaded. It's if you start bringing in extra things that are separate, um, like if you needed to load a second model or you needed to make an API request or something like that, then
That was the
that's where the
situation for
DTO,
me.
yeah. And that's
I needed
where
I had an API request that I had to make, and I
mhm,
had to pass that data along with it. But it wasn't. I didn't need all of the data from the API request in the model. But I did need it for later on in my pipeline. So
yeah. Yeah, and this is where I came up with the notion of an alertable. Was it an alertable? There was
yes,
something. Yeah, something
yes,
like
yep,
that, where it's like this is the thing that needs to get shunted through the entire pipeline. And so that's where that happened. And that was effectively my traveler DTO, where it was the thing that I could attach things to and things like that. So I think it worked really nicely in the end.
I
Mohammed
agree.
didn't, when I was talking to him about it, he didn't seem to recoil in horror too much. So I think I must have done okay.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying about like keeping it kind of in the same, and then we talked about this a little bit before too, is that like you're queuing that initial job, so like it could be retried if you needed to, but
Hmm.
you're not queuing all the additional pipes.
Yeah,
Each one of them
correct.
isn't like a queued thing, so you don't have to worry about that. So that's nice.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I think that about wraps it for us.
That
This
brings
was
us
episode 108. Just
that brings
kidding.
us right to our wonderful sponsor, Fathom
Oh
Analytics.
yes,
You
yes,
can do it this
yes.
week. You haven't
Sure,
spoken about them for a
absolutely.
while.
They've actually had some pretty cool stuff recently. They've been killing with their blog posts. Have you noticed that?
Their
Lots
blog
of
posts
blog posts
are
recently.
very in depth. They've got lots of things to say. I've been speaking with Jack as well. They're looking at in their next iteration to essentially just dump MySQL and do everything in Elasticsearch, which is interesting. So be cool to see.
And then eventually DynamoDB,
Yeah,
which was also interesting. So Adam Wathan has a full stack radio out there on DynamoDB. I just listened to it the other day. Seems very interesting, but
you're
also
even
quite a
further
bit
behind on
different than.
podcasts than I am.
Yeah, well, I it is true, but it was actually very timely because it was like, uh, yeah, well, it was when I was going to pick up a couch. That's a whole nother story, but but
It's
anyway,
interesting because there's no like development environment for DynamoDB as far as I know. Like DynamoDB is in AWS and you have to just use it there, I think. They talked about
Yeah,
that?
right. Well, I think there is a Java like applet you can
Right. Okay.
install that will kind of provide a local version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Yep. So yeah, they talk about their tech stack in their blog. They also talk about the Cloudflare outage. They talk about their 1-year review of Laravel Vapor and how they've been using that. They also talk about their competition. It seems like there's been popping up a bunch of people recently. It's like one of those things where like once you buy a yellow Mustang and you notice how many yellow Mustangs there are out there on the road, right? Like until
Mm-hmm.
then that you never saw them. Like they were out there, but
Correct.
you never saw them. It's like, and I think they're kind of looking at the same thing like, wow, it's like there's a bunch of privacy focused analytics companies popping up all over the place all of a sudden. But the great news is there's an amazing team behind this one, and they've got a really good head start on their competition, I think. So if you're interested in using Fathom, it's a fast, simple, and privacy focused analytics platform. It is built on Laravel and built by some of our really good friends. So if you're looking for something as an alternative to Google Analytics so that you can stop scrolling through pages and pages of reports and especially collecting lots of personal data about your visitors, you should definitely check out Fathom Analytics. It gives you simple website analytics. There's no cookies notice. So when you have that cookies bar along the bottom, based on that EU law that passed a couple years ago, you don't have to have that anymore because you're not collecting cookies. It's not a thing. You hit unlimited websites. You can be assured that everything is ready for large surges of traffic. And they can completely handle that because they scale automatically because they're built on top of Vapor. But you get this one-page, real-time snapshot look at all of the traffic coming to your site with all the metrics that are important and interesting to you all on a single page. And so instead of having to dig through tons and tons and tons of stuff, you can just check it out right on the front page. They also have a demo you can see at any time, which I think points to Paul Jarvis's page, which has basically the dashboard that you would see in real time with all of the visitors that are coming to his site, as well as where they're coming from, mobile versus desktop, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty cool. So if Fathom is something you're interested in checking out, you can go to usefathom.com/north. You will get I think a $20 credit towards your bill. And let me see here. And then a free 14-day trial as well. So it's pretty generous. So 14 days for free and then $20 off of your first month's bill. So you get 14 days plus a month, I think. So pretty generous offer. You should definitely go check that out. Usefathom.com/north. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, definitely. And don't forget to check out our website, thenping.me. You can jump on there at the moment and plug in your email address. Disregard the fact that it says sign up for early access for a beta that is opening in October. That was actually meant to be last October, and we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into this time last year. So definitely get that in there. Join the people that are on the list, and when we start rolling out the invitations on the 1st of August, hopefully we can get you in and you can start testing it out and let us know how good it is, how bad it is, whether you're going to continue using it, whether you wish it never existed. And it'd be interesting to see how many people turn up the issues that we kind of didn't know existed until we were running these things on our apps. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes for people. I suspect there will be a few people out there that will have not broken things, but just things that you don't know would be affecting your application until you were monitoring it.
Yeah, I think it'll be actually surprising to people. Honestly, I really do. Anybody who's got an app that's like semi-complex that has a lot of scheduled jobs, you'll probably find something. Well, this was episode 80. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can find show notes for this episode at northmeetsouth.audio or northmeetsouth.audio /80. Is that right? You're looking at me like I'm weird. Is that right?
Because you don't remember our website.
I know, every single time. It's every week. I don't know if you noticed that. You can also talk to us on Twitter at Jacob Bennett, at Michael Jordan, or at North South Audio. And then you can give us 5 stars on your podcatcher of choice. That'd be really appreciated. We will thank you individually. Do that. We'll thank you on the show.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah. All right, everybody. That's it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Amazing. Bye all.
See ya.